Hey, good morning. Today's departure is from Great Falls, Montana to Minot, North Dakota. Started with a beautiful sunrise and headed to the east, but the wind was fierce. But it was some beautiful scenery nonetheless. Visited a beautiful view spot of the Missouri River. Unfortunately, I found a tire that was, my rear tire had a nail in it, had to have a field repair because nobody would touch it in the town of Glasgow where I was at. After that field repair, I headed to Williston, North Dakota, where I found a really nice Arnie's motorcycle shop that waited for me to get it fixed. After that, drove on to Minot, where I met up with Nick and his beautiful wife Megan, who put me up for the night and fed me. And then from there, I stayed the night and had breakfast with a good friend, Sean Masters, and Nick, before I headed on the next day. Ended up going to Bemidji, Minnesota.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just leaving good friends, Megan and Nick, dear friends of ours. They put me up for tonight in Minot, and now I'm heading north of Minot, and I'm going to head east towards Lake Bronson State Park, where I remember as a kid going swimming and fishing with my dad. That's where he grew up. Difficult morning. My my son's house got pretty much destroyed in the hurricane down in North Augusta, South Carolina, right on the border of Augusta, Georgia. Got a text this morning from him saying he's okay, his wife's okay, the dogs are okay. But, you know, the house is, a tree came in through the garage in their master bedroom just 10 feet away from where they sleep in. So now what do I do? You know, I want to go help them, but I don't know. I'm in freaking Minot, North Dakota. Talk to him, and he says I should keep riding. Talk to everybody, they say I should keep riding. So I'm going to keep riding. I was thinking of going home, grabbing the truck, and driving down there, but I wouldn't be down there for 5 days. Going home, picking up my RV, taking it down there, but it's really small. Again, I wouldn't be down there for 5 days. I need to get into a hotel or temporary housing of some sort. So I'm going to continue riding. Okay, we're just in about, I don't know, 5 miles from the Minnesota border or so, or maybe closer. The scenery's changed tremendously in the last, 20 miles. We're in the Red River Valley. You're seeing all sorts of different types of agriculture down here. And this is flat Minnesota, I remember. We're on my way to Lake Bronson first, where my childhood memories of going fishing and swimming, and then to Helma, where my dad was born, and Carlstead, Minnesota, where he went to high school. But anyway, I promised to talk to you guys about my experience with rescue, and in particular, why the Others May Live Foundation is so important to me. So I'm going to take you back to 1998. At the time, I was a flight commander with the 66 Rescue Squadron. I was a captain, and just gotten back from a deployment to Kuwait. It's like 4-month deployment. Anyway, July of that year, my son Eric was born, and then September 2nd, I remember my wife and I, this is a 66 Rescue Squadron, Nellis Air Force Base again, at Las Vegas. I took my wife out to the Rio casino for dinner. Had my favorite thing there, seafood buffet. Anyway, that was September 2nd, so it was our 9th anniversary. Well, so it was a wonderful night. I remember standing up on top of the Rio looking over the Las Vegas skyline. Thinking it was pretty cool. The next morning I got up. My mom was staying with us, and it was kind of cool. I was flying fixed wing at the time, and I took my son Andrew, who was just 3 or 4 at the time, up flying in a private airplane out of North Las Vegas Airport, and I also took my mom flying, and that was kind of cool. Took them up and went around Vegas a little bit, and Red Rock Canyon and whatnot. I remember my son being in the back thinking he was going to throw up. It was kind of a quirky day. Got back. My son had to go to a birthday party for a friend of mine's house just next door, and I was going to work a night shift that night. This is the September 3rd, 1998. Just a very typical day. I was going to be working nights. I wasn't flying. I was going to be designated as the top 3, which is the commander's representative, and SOF, which is called supervisor flying. There was a flight of 2 going out, a night vision formation flight, TAC formation flight, and just like a typical day, had a lot of training to do. We had training in the back of both aircraft. We had 12 crew members on board between the 2. One of them was Lieutenant Hartwell, who had asked me to go flying. He was a casual status lieutenant, and I remember a couple weeks before he said, "Hey, can I get on a flight?" And yeah, I was able to get him on this flight. So Lieutenant Hartwell, Hal Milton was the flight lead, with Carl Youngblood up front, and Phil Miller and Greg Lewis in the 2 ship. And I'll talk more about the different crew members, but there was training for flight engineers in the back on both aircraft, and Kenny England, Jeff Armour, Purnell were all doing training. Matt Sturtevant. Anyway, I'll get into more specifics on that. But so I came into work, saw the crews, got aware of what they were doing, and then my job was basically to sit and observe and make sure everything's good to go. And I remember as the guys left the front desk to go out to the aircraft, to step to the aircraft, they said, "All right, man, guys, have a great flight. Lieutenant Hartwell, have fun. We'll see you tonight when you get back. Fly safe," as we always say. So the night went on without a hitch, and they took off. It was a pretty night, although there was some thunderstorms in the area, just a little bit unusual. And I remember just sitting in my office, kind of waiting for them to get back, and sometime that evening, I remember walking up to the front desk and checking with the folks up there and say, "Hey, have you guys heard from Jolly 38 and Jolly 39? Nope. Well, I was getting close to them to come back, and I remember looking up at the board and with the names of the crews. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I couldn't really tell why, but just something seemed out of place. Something was wrong. But anyway, I let it go for another 20 minutes. They weren't due back for 30 minutes. And it came back time for, I think it was like 5 minutes before they were due back. And I came back to the desk and I asked the front desk, "All right, have you heard from them yet?" No. I was getting kind of anxious. and their land time, forgive me for the time, I think it was like 9 o'clock, and I hadn't heard anything. So I called the range control office and asked them if they'd heard from them. And they said, yeah, we just heard from Jolly 3839. I said, are you sure you heard from Jolly 3839? Yes, we did. And they were up at this location. And I go, well, they weren't at that location. They were at a different range. There was a flight of the weapons school out there, 60s, doing some training. So I thought maybe they got confused with them. For a second, I felt relieved, and then I felt something was wrong. So I went back to the desk, and I just had the front desk, and I remember thinking, Hal Milton, Catfish was his call sign, Lieutenant Colonel Milton. He was my mentor. He was somebody that believed in me and trained me when I switched over from the Army to the Air Force just a year and a half earlier. He was my number one mentor, and I just remember him just being always spot on with making communications and check-ins. Here it is at their landing time, maybe a couple minutes later, and I'm literally, I just have this terrible feeling. So I tell the front desk officer, the SDO, staff duty officer, I said, break out the checklist. And they go, what? I said, break out the checklist for missing aircraft. And this is extraordinarily unusual. You usually go 5, 10, 20. I think the checklist allows for 30 minutes to an hour of being late. And here is just a few minutes afterwards. And I said, run the checklist. And I knew what that meant. I was probably going to get my ass handed to me by hopefully Hal Milton when he gets back, but I ran it. So we started going through the checklist, and one of the things was to notify the squadron commander and then the base commander, which is a general. And they stopped there for a second. I said, do it. Called range control, called the weapons school to try to find out where they were, and they were okay. And it was at this point, and about 45 minutes before I was supposed to run this massive checklist, we were running it. I just had that feeling. And, well, time went on. I was able to get a hold of the weapons school guys and redirect them to the routing of where I thought they were. And the generals notified. Colonel Summers was coming in. He was our squadron commander. And I had the weapons school flight of HH-60s go look for him. And then we got the word about 45 minutes later they found a crash site. That's when everything really took a turn. But for me, I was in checklist mode. I was trying to figure out what's going on. Immediately I said, secure their briefing room, secure the records, contacted maintenance, secure all the records from the aircraft, lock down the squadron. I had PJs that were there, and I said, lock down the doors and guard the doors. And this is before the squadron commander got there, the general, and started preparing for what, well, now I knew was the worst situation. Shortly thereafter, after they found the crash site, they were able to land, and we were notified there were no survivors. And again, I just kept pursuing, working the checklist and analyzing. I didn't realize it's like an hour and a half later, 2 hours going into this. Totally focused on trying to do what needed to get done. About this time, Colonel Summers came in, and a friend of mine, Spanky Peterson, that was the birthday party that my son went to earlier. It was for his kids. And also got a notification that one of the spouses had called in and wanted to know where her husband was. It was getting late. She didn't identify herself as a spouse, and someone told her there's been an incident, and she said she's coming in. So she didn't live that far. Again, I had the PJs there. I had waiting for her to come in the door, and that was hard when she came there. And I've been working the checklist. One to efficiently deal with everything, and everything about efficiencies and non-emotional was gone when she showed up. And she was incredibly upset. Dave Summers and Spanky met her, and I tried to help her, and I didn't know what to do at that point. But Spanky and Dave Summers took her, grabbed her, and pulled her into a briefing room and got her away. And it was at this time that, as the time was pressing on, we had 11 other names of people that we had to notify. The chaplain was there by this time, and she told us that we needed to wait until official notification teams came. I said, well, do you have 11 teams right now available? And she goes, no, it'll be tomorrow at the earliest. And I said, sir, we're losing time here. We need to do something to notify or at least be with the family members. And he agreed. And so going against military protocol, he says, oh, make a list of names of people to go out to the different homes, and their job will be to just notify or be with the family members and say, there's been an incident. There's been an incident, and I can't tell you anything at this time. We're still learning, but we're going to be with you. And that was our guidance from the squadron commander, and the chaplain, with disagreement, couldn't say enough to say no. So we pressed forward, and so now the next thing I got to do is I sat down and I looked at the list of the flyers, and if you can imagine doing that in your own place of work and think about, okay, here's this man, his best friend is, write it down. Here's this man, who's his best friend. I went down the list and made that list, which I think about today. It's rough. Well, I got to one name, it's Phil Miller, and he lived next to me, and I could think of nobody else besides me to do it. And so I called my wife in to come with me. I called all the other 11 people to come in and get a briefing from the chaplain and the squadron commander, and that's how we did it. They all came in. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning by this time, and meanwhile all the other emotions of recovery and all that's going on, but my gears shifted to not notification but support. So we got our briefing and drove back to my house with my wife and an airman that wanted to go with me. I forgot her name. And went back to my house, and I threw up. I just was nauseated by the whole thing, and collected myself and went over to Phil's house, my wife and the airman, and it's just starting to get light, and a knock on the door. Phil's wife is there, and she looks at me, obviously been waiting for some information about her husband, and then I'm there, and I can't say anything, and she just slumps over to the wall, and I grab her, take her into the living room. His kids are the exact same age as my kids, and just trying to deal with this whole thing. So I sat with her for 5 hours. The news came on saying there's been an accident, and trying to keep her away from the TV. And the notification team didn't make it there until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we did the right things by being with her, and she was very upset. But the official notification team came from the Air Force. And there you go. Once they came, I stayed with her for a little longer. It's kind of a blur for the rest of the day. And that same event was happening all over Vegas. And that was September 3rd, 1998. Well, that was the next day, September 4th. But the crash of Jolly 38 and 39, my dear friends, that were killed in a mid-air collision. The reasons why or what happened was inconclusive. But coming up on the Minnesota border here. There's Minnesota. And there you go. What I learned later is that that Others May Live Foundation was started to support the members of Jolly 38, family members of Jolly 38 and 39, to support their children in education or whatever they needed. And I really didn't know that Others May Live Foundation was because of that. I learned of that later. I ended up being stationed in Iceland after that. And so what that Others May Live Foundation helped my friends, Greg Lewis, Hal Milton. Hal didn't have any kids, but Carl Youngblood, Phil Miller, Jeff Armour. I have all these stories of these individual people, and I'd like to go over them. So I'm going to take a break and think about it, because these are not just pictures to me. They're friends. I mean, I didn't know Lieutenant Hartwell very well. These are guys I deployed with, spent a lot of time with, and it hurt so very hard to this day. It still does. And to know that something like Jolly 38 and 39 are supported by that the Others May Live Foundation is very, very important to me. And that's why I'm asking for your support.
Hello everybody. I'm in Lake Bronson State Park, northern Minnesota. It's a great place for memories for me. The water's been kind of drained, I guess, but go swimming on the beach over there at that point. And then when I was a little kid, I remember wanting to swim across the lake, saying I was going to do that someday. And came back here with my dad when my grandmother was sick, and did just that. My dad got a canoe and we swam across the lake. It's just something to remember. First memories of being a little kid here, and spending time with my sister and fishing, and I had to come here. So beautiful park. It's unfortunately the water's kind of low. Remember picnicking right there in that building with my grandma, and yeah, so it's kind of a nice place to be. Next I'm going to be going to Helma, Minnesota, where my dad was born, I think, and that's where he grew up, and then Carlstead, where he went to high school. Was hoping to get to Duluth. I don't think I'm going to get there tonight because I'm running out of time. Just late start with my son finding out about him having his house damaged by the hurricane down there, Helena. So thank goodness he's okay, but significant damage to his house. But anyway, so here we are, Lake Bronson, and one of the things I wanted to do was cover down on my friends from Jolly 38 and 39, and what they meant to me, just different stories about them to kind of put more of a person to it. And you know, that was just a horrible event, but these are great people. That doesn't change. I was looking at Sergeant Kevin Burnell, and flight engineer, one awesome guy, always had a smile, always working on his Jeep, and just I don't think I ever saw him in a bad mood. Just love that guy. And Kenny Eaglin, I can't even tell you his master's degree. I mean, he was so uber smart. He would come into my office, sit down and talk to me, and I can't even pronounce what his master's degree is, and I can't even remember to this day. But most humble, smart, capable flight engineer. Just, I mean, you just wanted to be a guy like Kenny Eaglin. Greg Lewis, Captain Greg Lewis, I would have to say, up until that point in my career, probably the most talented and gifted officer and pilot that I'd ever worked with. I remember when I switched over to the Air Force, we all went out for a run, and kind of prided myself on being a pretty good runner, but Greg and I separated from a group of, I don't know, 6 or so, and I don't know if he was sizing me up or what, but we took off, and we were just flying in front of the group and along the fence line at Nellis, up and down gravel banks and whatnot. And I remember he was just talking normal, like I'm talking to you, and I couldn't figure out how he was not winded. I said, he was asking me some questions. I said, Greg, can we talk about this later when I get some air in my lungs? But just looked up to that guy so much, his talent, his capabilities, his wit. Really one of the greatest guys I've ever worked with to this day. Matt Sturdivant, he was a new gunner to us. In fact, he was still living in temporary housing when the accident happened. We had new guns put on our aircraft, these Gao miniguns. Before that, we were M240s, 7.62 machine gun. And we got these Gaos in, and I remember I went up flying a couple times, and we were going up to the range, and I'd say, all right, cleared, right side fire, left side fire, and then the guns would jam up. And this went on for weeks. We had, our flight engineers and gunners weren't as experienced on this new Gao. And then Matt Sturdivant came in and went up to the range with Matt. He wasn't even in process. He went flying with us right away to help us with our miniguns. And I remember flying up with him on the range, and I said, all right, cleared left side fire, right side fire, clear. And then I expected the pop and the gun jam, but Matt Sturdivant was back there. He came to us from the Special Operations Community 53s and cleared right side fire. All of a sudden, whomp, wham, high rate. I about rolled the helicopter. I couldn't believe how crazy it was, the sound it was. I mean, oh my gosh, just so talented. His family they were just in TLF when this accident. He came in fired up to help us and didn't even wait till he got into housing. Jesse Stewart was a young airman, PJ. I really, to be honest, didn't get to know him as well, but just an outstanding young man, somebody that you could always, super athletic, friendly, always open with a smile, ready to go, hard charging. Just, you look at what you wish your son to be, you look at Jesse Stewart. And then Phil Miller. Phil, again, was a guy that lived right next to me, just a couple blocks away. His kids were the same age as I. And, you could always trust that Phil didn't like beer, but if you go to his house, he'd have beer for you. And that was just the way he was. Carl Youngblood, he was like one of the first guys I met when I came to the squadron. And he, just was so welcoming and intelligent. This was his Finney flight. He was on his way to Iceland when he was killed. And that was just so unbelievably tragic. No time is a good time, but that was his last flight with the squadron. He was moving on to Iceland. Then Lieutenant Hartwell, I mentioned him. He's graduated the Air Force Academy, came to us and was on status to be with us before he went to flight school, and snowbird status, I think they called it. And he ended up coming up to me and asking me to go for a flight because I was a flight commander, and got him on this flight. I didn't get to know him too well, but what I saw of him, he was just a wonderful young man with a bright future. Justin Wojtasek, the other PJ, he was a character. I can't help, every time I think of him, he wore a bikini someplace. I think it was over in Kuwait. And that was a little off, but it was so damn funny. And just a crack up of a kid. So much fun to be around. And Adam Stewart, he was another gunner trainer, and he was going through training that night. Somebody I really didn't know as well. He was new to the squadron. And just going through his qualifications. But last guy I would talk about is Hal Milton. Hal Catfish Milton from northern Florida. Redneck Riviera. When I got to the squadron, I got to admit, it was very difficult. I had switched over from the Army in 1996, and he took me under his wing, and to my chagrin, actually, made me a flight commander and a DO on my first, director of operations on my first deployment to Kuwait. He just absolutely believed in me and wouldn't tolerate me not believing in myself. And yeah, so he was, like my number one mentor in the squadron. I'd go to him for guidance, and another great runner. Well, he would run in Kuwait at noon. He would eat a huge breakfast in the morning and then go run in Kuwait. You got to understand, it's like 120 degrees. And he wanted me to, I ran with him once, and I wouldn't do it again. It was just too hot. The other thing he loved to do was just go to the Lake Mead, and hang out on the weekends with his truck and go camp and go fishing. And just a good old boy from the Florida Panhandle, and just really looked up to him, and he was gone. He was the one I was telling you about that I knew that's why I knew something was wrong, because he didn't call in. He always did. And his truck, that was something that really struck me that night when I got the list of names to go out and be with the families. I walked into the parking lot, and that's something I keep going back to. I saw Hal's truck, and then I saw all the vehicles of the guys. Kevin's Jeep. One of the guys I didn't talk about was Jeff Armour, and Jeff, another flight engineer instructor, he and I were pretty close. He wanted to become a pilot, and there was this program at Mesa Airlines up in northern New Mexico that you could go there and pay a fee of whatever it was, an 18-month program, and at the end of it you got a job with Mesa Airlines. And he and I were talking about that for months. As a matter of fact, that next day after the flight, he was supposed to go down there to northern New Mexico and his whole family were to go to this program and see about signing up. And in fact, I went to his house the day after the accident to see how his wife was doing, and the car was still loaded up with coolers for the kids. And those kind of things that really strike you. His car loaded up, the parking lot full of my friends' vehicles. That night, I relive it all the time. So I wanted to share that with you as far as my perspective. I know it's kind of a beautiful place to do it. I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to put a face and a story to the names, and I'll send you the pictures of the guys. So I'm going to continue on, do a little family tour here, go to my dad's place, and maybe I'll send some pictures with that. Alrighty, guys, take care.
So left Lake Bronson, headed over to Helma to visit my old great-grandpa John's old store in Helma. It looks a lot different today. Then I visited the grave of my grandma Alice and grandpa Olav, and then checked out the church where they were married. Real special trip for me to get over there and see that. Left Helma, went to Carlstead, and then from Carlstead went to Bemidji, where I bed down for the evening. Long day.